Welcome everyone to this very important video. And what just happened in Germany is mind-boggling. It's nothing short of a coup, a parliamentary coup that spits in the face of voters right a few weeks after the election. Something so undemocratic that a lot of people are shocked right now. So let me tell you what happened. You remember the German election was a couple of weeks ago. So what we see here, the German election results. The CDU came in with 28.6%. These are the so-called conservatives, but they're also the party of Merkel that actually opened the borders and swamped Germany with millions and millions of immigrants that normally would never be allowed to come to Germany. And the second largest party is the AfD, that Elon said is the only party that can save Germany. And as always, Elon is probably right, with 20.8%, 100% more than they had before. And the actual former government, which is the FDP, the Greens, and the SPD, look what they lost. They had massive, massive losses. This is very important for this video. Massive losses. The SPD, the worst result since 150 years or something. And the FDP lost 7%, which is a lot, 7 percentage points if you only had 11. So they are completely punished. In other words, the voters said, no way this madness has to end. And the FDP actually was responsible enough to end the coalition. Now, Merz is the leader of the CDU, and he came in and said a bunch of promises to the German people. He promised, I will never increase the so-called debt break in Germany. This is a constitutionally written down agreement that the parliament cannot go over certain debt limits. And he promised, I'm never going to touch this thing. I'm the CDU, I'm conservative. I would never do that. I will not increase taxes. I will not allow mass migration anymore. And all kinds of promises. And guess what happened today, a couple of hours ago? What happened is that this exact same guy, Friedrich Merz, the CDU, and he wants to be chancellor, he decided to actually call in the parliament, the old parliament. That's the scandal here. He called in the old parliament, not the new parliament. He postponed, through some tricks, the formation of the newly elected parliament and used the last week, more or less, the last possible week constitutionally to call in the old government, said, you know what, I have a little surprise here. I'm going to take the Greens and the SPD, the two loser parties where the German people said, no way, get them out of our face. They cannot make any decisions anymore. So they lost the election. But Merz took them and together with his CDU had enough votes to change the constitution. So this is not a small little thing. In order to remove this debt break that allows you to basically spend limitlessly, made it specific for military spending. He wants limitless military spending. So he said, I can't get this constitutional change done with the new parliament because the Linke and the AfD would block it. He wouldn't have had the 2/3 majority to change the freaking German constitution. So what does Merz think? Oh, good idea. I just basically lost the elections with these people here next to me, the Greens and the SPD, because the German people said, this is horrendous what you did to us. You're destroying our country. So they voted them down. It's called democracy. Merz said, screw you voters. Who cares about the German voter? I will use a little trick, a little legal hack that allows me in this last possible week to call in the parliament, the old de-elected parliament, and will change the German constitution against the will, the explicit will of the people. So what he did is he created now a possibility for these guys to increase the German debt by $1 trillion. So that's the equivalent in the United States of 4 trillion because Germany has a fourth of the population. So basically equivalent of a $4 trillion financial coup against the will of the people in the United States. I think this is outrageous. It's unbelievable that something like this can happen. And of course, in Germany, the media, the absolutely deceptive German media, says nothing about it. All they are doing is like reporting on the facts. The fact is not that someone spit in the face of the German voter and basically committed a huge crime against the democratic spirit of that republic. But they're just reporting, oh, interesting, there was a little vote in parliament. They just voted for $1 trillion in additional debt, so we can actually build more tanks to attack or defend against Russia, whatever. So this is pretty outrageous, but it gets even better. Why is Merz doing that? Because he decided that he doesn't want to form a coalition with the second strongest party that is also a conservative party. They are basically the same. They're conservative parties. They have some disagreements on globalist policies, where the AfD is against EU, the AfD is against war, the CDU is pro-war, and the CDU is pro-EU. On all other topics, on paper at least, they are fully aligned. They are conservative. They don't want to create debt. They want to have a strong economy. They are not for the climate stuff. So they seem to be very aligned. But of course, the AfD means it when they write this down. The CDU is lying about it, as we find out now. We should also remember that Merz, right before the election, made it a top priority to promise the exact opposite of what he's doing now. He promised, I will never, never increase the debt. I will never open the borders again, or keep it open. It's already clear that he's working on tax increases on top of it, open borders, and by having the excuse to say, well, I have no choice, because the only option I have is the SPD, and I needed to also appease the Greens to get this constitutional change done. And the SPD is forcing me to keep the borders open because they're leftists. Well, is he being forced to keep the borders open? No, he could just form a coalition with the AfD, because the German voters decided we want a CDU-AfD coalition. That's what the German voters said in the election. But Merz said, screw you, I don't care about the voters. I'm going to create a coalition with the leftists. So I think it's a horrible, very, very dark day in Germany. I'm doing this video for especially our American viewers to understand how bad things are in Europe, how much of a lack of democratic understanding is there. This would never fly in the United States. This would be the biggest scandal ever. This is a complete violation of the democratic principle. But in Europe, and Germany is not alone with that, in the UK it would be the same thing, right? In many other countries, in France, no one cares about elections. There's an elite leadership class, and they say, screw you people, we're in charge, we don't care. And the voters get extremely frustrated right now. I know a bunch of Germans, they're not happy, but they're frustrated and resigned. They say, well, we knew it, there's no real democracy. Well, you have to do something about it. You can't just sit back and take this kind of stuff. I think it's very bad. There are vast repercussions, obviously, and the repercussions will include financial market impact, of course. We will see that the financial stability of Germany and Europe will be undermined. The yields of bonds go up like crazy now, right? They were much lower than United States yields, but they're now up to 2.7%. Germany had like below 1%. They will pay up to $400 billion in additional interest over that period. Borrowing is going to be much more expensive. The debt to GDP ratio is going through the roof for Germany, right? Currently at 66% and estimated to go to 90% because of this. And why? What do the Germans get for this money? I can tell you what. More fraud, waste, and abuse. When you look in the details of this budget, it's a joke. $500 billion goes into so-called infrastructure. And with left-wing governments like this, we know what that means. What Joe Biden did with infrastructure spending. $7 billion for 3 charging stations and things like that. And their friends line their pockets with it. It's not a big secret. One of the most outrageous things, by the way, is that because the Greens, which is the crazy party in Germany, absolutely woke. It's basically the woke wing of the Democratic Party isolated as its own party. That's what the Greens are. They demanded, in order to get their votes of the losing party in the election that Merz needed for the constitutional change, the Greens also demanded that Germany now writes into its own constitution. Can you imagine this? The constitution that they have to achieve by 2045. Think about what comes now. You guessed it. Climate neutrality. So now the Germans were insane enough to allow their politicians, that they just de-elected, by the way, to change their constitution to write some climate hoax into the constitution. And climate neutrality, I mean, you know all about it, right? So you can read up what that means. It means like, oh, you can either reduce your CO2 emissions or you can offset them by sending some money to Africa. So some, warlord can do funny things with your money and to create climate justice. And the whole DEI madness comes into that. $100 billion is committed in this budget to pure climate stuff. It's not just burning the money, it's using the money to actually do bad things. When it comes to the military budget of Germany, you also have to understand Germany already has a bigger military budget than France, slightly bigger. The French army Well, it functions more or less a little bit. The German army does not function at all. So basically, you're spending more than the French. You're doing much worse job in getting your army ready. Now you're increasing the spending and hope the army gets better. That's not how it works. I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see if Elon would go in there, you could slash the budget in half and increase defense capability by 10x. No problem. I can guarantee you that. So increasing the budget on a failing operation like this is a complete waste of money. I think the takeaway here is this is a disaster. Besides the dumb political decisions that are connected here, a much more important thing, it's punching the voters of Germany in the face to run a special election because the government imploded 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. See that the old government gets punished like crazy and de-elected. To have one big winner of this election, which is the AfD, and the biggest party, the CDU, which is not a win for the CDU because they should be much bigger historically. To then have the CDU say, you know what, I don't like the AfD, too much competition here. Let's do an alliance with the left-wingers who just got de-elected. Use that old parliament in the last week possible to change the constitution, make all kinds of concessions to the craziest party, the Greens, that is highly destructive to Germany. And then all you hear in the media is, oh, they just had a little vote in parliament. No, they had the vote in the old parliament that the German people just decided to de-elect. So I'm pretty shocked by this. Not too surprised that in Germany, no one really seems to get it, except for maybe the AfD voters and the more informed voters. But the media is just saying, oh, oops, little vote, trillion in digital debt, very interesting. Now we can fight Russia. That's kind of the narrative. Amazing. Just another reason that we guys cannot rely on these governments to do anything for us, that we need to seize control of our own lives. That's why we have something great called Pioneer Land. Let me tell you about Pioneer Lands. As you know, I believe AGI is the greatest disruption in the history of humanity. And we are facing the loss of all jobs, the complete disruption of our economy, and the complete foundational change of our society within the next 5 years. But our media elites, our politicians, our corporate leaders are doing nothing to protect us. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're spreading mind viruses. They're lying to us in the media. They're opening our borders and they're promoting DEI. Why? Who knows? But it's going to lead to a complete disaster. But guess what? We have tens of thousands of people here on X, on YouTube, who get it, who are smart. Pioneer Lands is a place where smart people with shared values can prepare for AGI and build the future we want. And we do that by maximizing our capital, by doing some politics, and by building great families. The whole thing is free, and you can see more in the link in the description. I hope you join us. Let's get back to the video. Now you know about Pioneer Land. I hope Germany survives this. I think it's really, really bad. I think it will create a crisis. And I want to end the video just showing you what's actually happening here on the latest surveys in Germany, because not all voters are completely ignorant. Here you have the federal election, and you saw the results, AfD at 20.8% and CDU at 28.5%. So there's a difference of 8% after this disaster, right? 2 weeks later. You see the AfD at 23% and the CDU at 27%. The left, the Communist Party, also won a lot. So they're also benefiting from that because people get radicalized, right? They say, well, maybe we need communism now because there is no democracy. So the AfD won and the radical left. But the differential between the AfD and the CDU is now down to 4%. So cut in half from 8% to 4%. Everyone who knows anything is predicting that Merz is so devastating to the CDU. A complete betrayal of unprecedented proportions here, that he will drive more and more of the CDU voters to the AfD. These parties are naturally very aligned. They are basically the same thing. The only difference is the CDU wants war. The CDU wants the European Union to be strong. The AfD is very anti-war, and they don't want the European Union to exist in the current form. Everything else, fiscally, other cultural issues, migration, they are more or less identical. So it's going to be very interesting how long it takes for the CDU voters to get really, really pissed here. I mean, what happened was a complete offensive disaster to them. Let's see what happens. Hope for the best for our German friends. Hope to see you soon.